The massive space station hung in the void like a crystal flower made of metal and light. Nexus Prime was the size of a small moon, its thousands of towers reaching out into space like fingers grasping at the stars. Inside its central chamber, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that could have held 100 humans. Speaker Zethver stood at the center of the room. His crystalline body caught the light from a dozen different suns, sending rainbow patterns across the walls. He was old, even by the standards of his people. He had lived for over 3,000 years and had seen the rise and fall of countless species across the galaxy. "The time has come," Zethver said, his voice like breaking glass. "We can wait no longer." Around the table, the other council members nodded their agreement. The ethereal ones floated in their containment fields, their energy forms pulsing with emotion. The massive Gorlan representative, a creature that looked like a walking mountain, rumbled his approval. Even the peaceful Aquarians, who rarely agreed to violence, had voted yes. "The humans have gone too far," continued the speaker. "In just 200 years, they have spread to over 40 star systems. They build cities where no cities should be. They make friends with species we have kept separate for good reasons. They ask questions that should not be asked." High above the chamber, screens showed images from across the galaxy. Human ships moved between the stars like silver fish. Human colonies dotted planets that had been empty for millennia. Human explorers pushed into regions of space that the Council had marked as forbiddens. "They are like a disease," said Korth the Mighty, the Gorlan representative. His voice was like an earthquake. "They spread without control. They change everything they touch." The speaker raised one crystalline hand. "Today we vote to end this threat, all in favor of the Human Containment Protocol." 12 hands, claws, tentacles, and energy fields rose in agreement. The vote was unanimous. Far from Nexus Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Explorer's Edge and watched the stars. He was a man in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of war. His ship was not large by military standards, but it was fast and well armed. More importantly, it carried some of the best people in the human fleet. Admiral called Captain Lisa Park from her station. She was young for a captain, barely 30, but she had earned her rank through skill and courage. "We're getting strange readings from the Kepler system." Morrison walked over to her console. The screen showed dozens of red dots moving toward human space. Each dot represented a ship, and there were far too many of them to be a trading fleet. "How many?" Morrison asked. "At least 200 ships, sir," Park replied. "Maybe more. They're coming from Council space." Chief Engineer Ryan Cole looked up from his repairs. He was a big man with rough hands and a gentle heart. "That's a lot of ships for a diplomatic mission." Before Morrison could reply, their communications officer spoke up. Ben Taylor was the youngest member of the crew, fresh out of the academy and eager to prove himself. "Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from New Kansas Colony." Morrison knew New Kansas well. It was one of humanity's most successful agricultural worlds, home to over 2 million people. Families lived there. Children played in fields of grain that grew under an alien sun. It was peaceful and beautiful, and far from any military targets. "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was filled with panic. "This is Governor Walsh on New Kansas. We are under attack." "Repeat, we are under attack. Unknown ships are bombing our cities. They're not responding to our calls for surrender. They're killing everyone." The transmission cut to static. Morrison felt his blood turn cold. Lisa Park's face went white. Even Ryan Cole, who had seen combat before, looked shocked. "Sir," then Taylor said quietly, "I'm getting similar transmissions from Harmony Station and the mining colony on Tertius Prime. 3 colonies, 3 different star systems, all under attack at the same time. This is not a coincidence," Morrison said. "This is war." On Earth, Dr. Kate Sullivan sat in her office at the Global Defense Headquarters. She was humanity's leading expert on alien species, a woman who had spent her life trying to build bridges between humans and their galactic neighbors. Her walls were covered with pictures from a dozen different worlds, showing her shaking hands, tentacles, and claws with alien friends. Her computer chimed with an incoming message. The symbol that appeared on her screen made her heart sink. It was the official seal of the Galactic Council, something she had not seen used in over 50 years. She opened the message and read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. To the human species, the message began. By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, your species has been declared a threat to galactic peace and stability. You have 30 standard days to withdraw all human presence from space beyond your home system. Failure to comply will result in the complete elimination of your species. This is not negotiable. This is final. Kate stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she reached for her emergency communicator and called the one person who might be able to help. Pete, she said when the gruff voice answered. We have a problem. General Pete Davis was not officially supposed to exist. His department, the Human Defense Initiative, was buried so deep in government files that most world leaders had never heard of it. For 20 years, he had been preparing for the day when humanity might have to fight for its survival against enemies from the stars. That day had finally come. I know, Davis said. I've been watching the attacks. How long do we have? 30 days, Kate replied. But Pete, there are 2 million people on New Kansas alone. How many more colonies are they going to destroy? Davis was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was hard as steel. All of them. They mean to wipe us out completely. The 30-day warning is just to make themselves feel better about genocide. Kate felt tears in her eyes. She had spent her life believing that different species could live together in peace. Now that dream was dying in fire and blood across the galaxy. What do we do? She asked. We fight, Davis said simply. We've been preparing for this day, whether we wanted to believe it would come or not. We have people in place, weapons hidden, ships waiting. The Council thinks they're dealing with the same humans they met 200 years ago. They're about to learn how wrong they are. As night fell on Earth, emergency meetings were called in every major capital. Military leaders who had spent their careers preparing for wars between human nations suddenly found themselves planning for something much bigger. Scientists worked through the night to understand alien technology that humanity would now have to face in battle. Diplomats tried desperately to find some way to avoid the coming war, but in secret facilities around the world, other preparations were being made. Weapons that had never been tested were loaded onto ships that officially did not exist. Messages were sent to humans living in alien space, men and women who had spent years building new lives among the stars. Now they would have to become soldiers whether they wanted to or not. The Council had made their decision. They would destroy humanity to preserve their ancient order. They had no idea what they had just started. They thought they knew humans from 2 centuries of limited contact. They thought humans were just another young species that could be controlled or eliminated when they became inconvenient. They were about to discover that humans were something the galaxy had never seen before. And by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late to stop what was coming. General Pete Davis sat in his underground office 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room looked ordinary except for the dozens of screens showing star maps and alien ship movements. For 20 years, he had built a network that nobody knew existed. Today, he would use it. His fingers moved across the keyboard, sending coded messages to 47 different star systems. Each message was just a few words long, but those words would change everything. The winter is coming. Prepare the harvest. Across the galaxy, humans who had lived quiet lives as traders and researchers suddenly became something else. They had waited for this day, hoping it would never come. Now they moved into action like pieces on a chessboard that the Council did not know existed. On the trade station Merchant's Rest, a human named Carl Johnson finished his morning coffee and walked to his small shop. For 5 years, he had sold spare parts to alien ship captains. They knew him as a friendly man who always had what they needed. They did not know that his shop sat directly above the station's main power grid. Carl opened a hidden panel in his floor and pulled out a device no bigger than his fist. He had built it himself over many months, one piece at a time. The aliens who bought parts from him had no idea they were helping him build a bomb. He set the timer for 1 hour and walked away. By the time the device exploded, taking out power to half the station, Carl was already on a ship heading for human space. Commander Amy Foster crouched in the tall grass of an alien world and watched the Council weapons depot through her binoculars. Beside her, 3 other humans waited in silence. They wore no uniforms and carried no flags. If they died here, no government would claim them. "How many guards?" whispered Jack Rivers, her second in command. 12 at the front gate, Amy replied. "Maybe 6 more inside." The Zephyrians said they could handle the back entrance. The Zephyrians were tall, thin aliens with blue skin and large eyes. For 300 years, they had been slaves to the Council, working in mines and factories while dreaming of freedom. When the humans offered to help them fight, they had agreed without hesitation. Amy checked her watch. In 10 minutes, the Zephyrians would attack the rear of the depot. Her team would go in through the front during the confusion. If everything went right, they would steal enough weapons to arm a small army. If things went wrong, they would all be dead by morning. "Remember," she said to her team, "we're not here to kill aliens. We're here to get weapons. Kill only if you have to." The attack began exactly on time. Explosions lit up the night as the Zephyrians struck from behind. The Council guards ran toward the sound of battle, leaving the front gate almost empty. Amy and her team moved like shadows. They had trained for missions like this on a dozen different worlds, learning to fight in low gravity and high gravity, in thick air and thin air. The Council guards were well equipped, but they were not soldiers. They were police officers trying to fight a war. Inside the depot, Amy found more weapons than she had hoped for. Plasma rifles that could cut through tank armor. Shield generators that could protect a small city. Even a few gravity bombs that could level mountains. "Take everything we can carry," she ordered. "Leave the rest for our Zephyrian friends." 20 minutes later, they were gone, vanishing into the night like they had never been there at all. Dr. Steve Mitchell worked late in his laboratory on Omega Station. Around him, alien scientists from a dozen different species continued their research, unaware that one of their colleagues was about to betray them all. Steve had worked on the station for 3 years, studying alien diseases and how to cure them. He was well liked and trusted. The other scientists often asked his opinion on difficult problems. They had no idea that he was copying every file in the station's computer system. Tonight was different. Tonight he had found something that made his blood run cold. The file was labeled Project Clean Slate, and it contained the plans for a biological weapon designed to kill only humans. The weapon would spread through the air like a cold virus, but it would only affect human DNA. Every human who breathed it would die. Within hours, Steve copied the file to a small device and slipped it into his pocket. Then he began deleting every trace of the research from the station's computers. It would take the alien scientists months to rebuild their work. As he worked, his friend Fluxstar approached his desk. The Aquarian looked worried, his tentacles twitching with nervousness. "Steve," Fluxstar said quietly, "you should leave this place. Tonight." Steve looked up in surprise. "Why? What do you know?" "I know that the Council has ordered all humans on this station to be arrested tomorrow morning." Fluxstar replied, "I know that you have been copying files that you should not have access to." And I know that you are a good person who does not deserve to die for the crimes of your species." Steve felt his heart pounding. "Will you help me?" Fluxdar was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "My people remember what it was like to be hunted by those stronger than us. We will not let it happen to humans if we can prevent it." An hour later, Steve was on a small transport ship heading away from the station. In his pocket he carried the information that could save his species from extinction. Captain Maria Santos guided her ship through the asteroid field with the skill of someone who had been flying for 20 years. The Shadowrunner was painted black and carried no identification marks. On the official records, the ship did not exist. Behind her, 5 transport ships followed in single file, each one carrying 1,000 human civilians from the colony on bright water. The colony had been beautiful once, with crystal lakes and floating cities. Now it was burning under Council bombardment. "How many more trips?" asked her co-pilot, Danny Wu. "At least 10, Maria replied. "Maybe 15 if we can find ships big enough." They were not the only ones running rescue missions. Across human space, civilian ships had been turned into refugee transports almost overnight. Luxury liners that once carried tourists now packed desperate families into every available space. Cargo ships dumped their loads to make room for children, who cried for parents they would never see again. The hidden bases that General Davis had built were filling up fast. Asteroid mines that had been abandoned for years suddenly came back to life, but instead of mining rock, they sheltered human refugees. Secret facilities on rogue planets that drifted between the stars became temporary homes for entire communities. Maria guided her small fleet toward one such base, a hollowed-out asteroid that looked empty from the outside. Inside, it could hold 50,000 people and had enough supplies to last for years. "Shadowrunner, this is Haven Base," came a voice over the radio. "We see you coming. Base 7 is open and ready." As Maria docked her ship, she watched families stumble out of the transport vessels. Children who had never seen anything but blue skies now lived in artificial caves lit by electric lights. Parents who had owned farms and businesses now owned nothing but the clothes on their backs. But they were alive. And as long as they were alive, there was hope. In his underground command center, General Davis watched reports flow in from across the galaxy. His people were striking back at the Council in ways they had never expected. Supply convoys disappeared in the night. Communication stations went offline without explanation. Weapons depots exploded for no apparent reason. The Council had expected to fight a war against human ships and human soldiers. They had not expected to fight against human ideas. For 200 years, humans had lived and worked alongside other species, building friendships and earning trust. Now those friendships were becoming alliances. Davis smiled as he read the latest report. The Zephyrians had declared their independence from the Council and asked for human military advisors. The Verdian Collective, who had never taken sides in any conflict, had offered to shelter human refugees in their vast forest worlds. Even some of the younger Council species were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the war. The Council thought they were hunting down a single species. They were about to discover that they had started a revolution. Captain Tony Rodriguez felt his ship shake as enemy fire struck the shields. The lightning strike was fast but small, and it was facing a Council dreadnought that was 10 times its size. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with the calm focus of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Shields at 60%, called his weapons officer, Linda Gray. "Enemy ship is trying to get a target lock," added Navigator Sam Price. Tony smiled. The Council ship was big and powerful, but it was also slow. It had been built to fight other large ships in careful, planned battles. It was not built to fight something that moved like an angry wasp. "Take us under their belly," Tony ordered. "Their big guns can't turn that far down." The lightning strike dove beneath the massive enemy ship, its hull scraping against the dreadnought's lower shields. Tony could see the enemy trying to bring smaller weapons to bear, but his ship was too close and moving too fast. "Fire everything we have at their engine section," Tony said. The small ship's weapons were nothing compared to the dreadnought's armor, but they were aimed at exactly the right spot. Years of studying Council ship designs had taught human engineers where the weak points were located. Explosions bloomed along the enemy ship's hull. The dreadnought's engines flickered and died, leaving the massive ship drifting helplessly in space. "This is Captain Rodriguez to all ships," Tony broadcast on the open channel. "The big one is down. Repeat, the dreadnought is disabled." Around him, the space battle changed in an instant. Human ships that had been running from the larger Council fleet suddenly turned and attacked. Zephyrian fighters, their hulls painted with symbols of freedom, dove in to support the assault. Even a few Verdian ships, slow but heavily armed, joined the fight. The Council forces had expected an easy victory. They found themselves surrounded by enemies they had not known existed. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the battle from the bridge of his flagship, the Defiant Spirit. The ship had once been a passenger liner, but human engineers had packed it with weapons and armor in just 3 weeks. It was not pretty, but it could fight. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're getting surrender signals from 6 Council ships." Morrison nodded. "Accept their surrender. But keep our guns trained on them. Some of these aliens have never been defeated before. They might not understand what surrender means." The battle in the Kepler Nebula was over in less than 2 hours. When it ended, the Council had lost 12 ships, including their largest dreadnought. The Human Alliance had lost 3 fighters and a destroyer. More importantly, they had won their first major victory. Across the galaxy, species that had been watching the war with nervous interest suddenly began to take sides. Dr. Julia White worked in a laboratory that did not officially exist, hidden inside an asteroid that looked empty from the outside. Around her, human and Zephyrian scientists worked together on a project that could change the war. "The quantum field is stable," reported Dr. Alex Chun, her research partner. Julia smiled as she looked at the device they had built. It was no bigger than a briefcase, but it could send messages instantly across the galaxy. The Council's communication networks relied on relay stations that could be attacked and destroyed. This new system needed nothing but empty space. "Let's test it," she said. Julia activated the device and sent a simple message to a similar device on the other side of the galaxy. The reply came back instantly, as if the two machines were sitting next to each other instead of being separated by thousands of light years. "It works," Alex said with wonder in his voice. Within hours, every human base and ship in the galaxy was connected by the new communication system. For the first time since the war began, the scattered human forces could coordinate their actions perfectly. General Davis used the new system to speak directly with Admiral Morrison, who was still cleaning up after the battle in the Kepler Nebula. "The Council is planning something big," Davis reported. "Our spies say they're moving their entire reserve fleet toward the Terminus Gate system." Morrison studied the star charts on his screen. Terminus Gate was an ancient fortress world that the Council had used as a prison for dangerous criminals. It was also rumored to be the location of their most secret weapons. "How many ships?" Morrison asked. "At least 500, Davis replied. "Maybe more. And Jake, there's something else. Dr. Mitchell's intelligence suggests they have some kind of super weapon at Terminus Gate, something that can destroy entire star systems." Morrison felt cold fear in his stomach. "Can we stop them?" "We have to," Davis said simply. "Because if we can't, they'll use that weapon on Earth." The news of the super weapon spread quickly through the Human Alliance. But instead of causing panic, it seemed to make everyone more determined to fight. On the forest world of Verdian Prime, The tree-like Verdians held their first war council in over 1,000 years. Their ancient leader, a being called the Great Root, spoke in a voice like wind through leaves. "We have remained neutral in all conflicts for millennia," the Great Root said. "We believed that peace could be maintained through wisdom and patience. But we have learned that some evils cannot be reasoned with." The Council would destroy an entire species simply because they fear change. This we cannot allow. The Verdian Collective voted to join the war against the Council. Their ships were few but powerful, each one capable of fighting several Council vessels at once. In the crystal cities of the ethereal realm, beings of pure energy debated in languages made of light and music. They had never interfered in the physical universe before, considering the struggles of matter-based life forms to be beneath their notice. But the humans had done something that impressed even these ancient beings. They had united dozens of different species in a common cause. They had shown that cooperation was stronger than domination. The Ethereals decided to act. On the mining world of Zephyr 7, former slaves turned soldiers as fast as weapons could be found for them. Commander Amy Foster worked with Zephyrian military leaders to train their people in modern warfare. "Your people are natural fighters," Amy told General Kethmer, the Zephyrian commander. "You just needed someone to show you how to use modern weapons." "For 3 centuries, we have dreamed of this day," Kethmer replied. "We will not waste this chance for freedom." The Zephyrian rebellion spread to dozens of worlds. Council forces that had been used to dealing with occasional riots suddenly found themselves fighting organized military campaigns. But it was not just the military situation that was changing. Across the galaxy, ordinary citizens of Council species were beginning to ask questions that had not been asked in thousands of years. Why were the humans considered so dangerous? What gave the Council the right to destroy an entire species? Were there other young races that deserved a chance to grow and learn? On the water world of Aquarius Beta, the peaceful Aquarians held emergency sessions in their underwater cities. They had always supported the Council because they believed in order and stability. But the destruction of human colonies had shocked them. "This is not justice," declared Elder Fluxstar. "This is fear made into policy. We cannot support the murder of innocents, no matter what species they belong to." The Aquarian Federation announced its withdrawal from the Council alliance. They would not fight against the Council, but they would no longer support the war against humanity. Similar declarations came from a dozen other species. The Council that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years was falling apart. But the old leaders were not ready to give up their power. If they could not maintain control through law and tradition, they would use fear. The superweapon at Terminus Gate was nearly ready. Soon, they would show the galaxy what happened to species that dared to challenge the established order. Admiral Morrison gathered his fleet for what might be the final battle of the war. Human ships, Zephyrian fighters, Verdian battlecruisers, and even a few vessels from species that most humans had never heard of before assembled in the darkness between the stars. They were outnumbered by at least 3 to 1. The enemy had better ships, better weapons, and better training. By every military calculation, the human alliance should lose. But Tony Rodriguez, floating in space in his small fighter, looked at the massive fleet around him and smiled. These were not just ships filled with soldiers. These were the representatives of dozens of species who had decided that freedom was worth fighting for. The Council had started this war to preserve their ancient empire. Instead, they had created something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. They had created hope. Colonel Nick Barnes crouched behind a broken wall and watched the Council fortress through his binoculars. Terminus Gate stretched out before him like a metal mountain, its towers reaching up into the dark sky. Somewhere inside that fortress was the weapon that could destroy Earth and every other human world. "How many guards?" whispered Sergeant Kim Lopez, his second in command. too many, Nick replied. But we don't have a choice. If we don't get inside and stop that weapon, this war is over. Behind them, 200 human soldiers waited in the ruins of an ancient city. They had landed on Terminus Gate 3 hours ago, fighting their way through waves of Council defenders. Half of their ships had been destroyed getting through the planet's defenses. The other half were fighting a desperate battle in orbit. Nick activated his radio. Phoenix team to all units, we're going in. Remember, our target is the central tower. Everything else is secondary. The assault began with explosions that lit up the night. Human soldiers poured out of the ruins, their weapons firing streams of energy at the fortress walls. Council defenders returned fire from protected positions, their plasma cannons cutting down anyone who moved too slowly. Nick led his team through the chaos, using every piece of cover they could find. A plasma bolt missed his head by inches, burning a hole in the wall behind him. He rolled forward and came up firing, his rifle cutting down 2 council guards. The main gate is too heavily defended, Kim shouted over the noise of battle. We need another way in. Nick spotted a drainage pipe that led under the fortress wall. It was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, and it probably led to a sewer system. But it was unguarded. This way, he called to his team. Hope, you don't mind getting dirty. In space above the planet, Commander Rachel Stone watched the battle from the bridge of the Defiant Spirit. The Council had brought over 600 ships to defend Terminus Gate. The Human Alliance had only 200, but they were fighting like their lives depended on it, because they did. Enemy dreadnought closing from portside, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mark Webb. All weapons target their engines, Rachel ordered. We need to keep them busy while our people get inside the fortress. The Defiant Spirit shook as enemy fire struck her hull. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and Rachel could smell smoke from damaged systems. The ship had been built for passenger service, not military combat. It was holding together through the skill of its crew and sheer determination. Hull breach on Deck 7, Webb reported. Damage control teams are responding. Rachel watched the tactical display as more Council ships moved to surround the human fleet. They were being overwhelmed by superior numbers. Unless something changed, soon, the orbital battle would be lost. That was when the ethereals arrived. Ships made of pure light materialized out of nowhere, appearing among the Council fleet like ghosts made real. The ethereals had never fought a physical battle before, but their energy-based weapons cut through Council shields like they were made of paper. This is incredible, Webb said, in amazement. The Council ships can't even target them. How do you shoot at something made of light? The arrival of the ethereals changed everything. Council ships that had been closing in for the kill suddenly found themselves under attack from enemies they could not understand. The orderly battle formation collapsed into chaos. Deep inside the Terminus Gate fortress, Nick Barnes and his team crawled through maintenance tunnels that had not been used in centuries. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ancient machinery. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. According to the plans Dr. Mitchell stole, the weapon control room should be just ahead, Kim whispered. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Nick could hear voices speaking in the musical language of the crystalline dominion. The guards were close. Nick hand-signaled to his team to wait, then crept forward until he could see into the control room. 12 Council technicians worked at stations around a massive machine that hummed with deadly energy. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed the locations of every human world. Earth was marked with a flashing red symbol. They're preparing to fire, Nick whispered into his radio. We have maybe 10 minutes. The attack had to be perfect. There would be no second chance. Nick threw a smoke grenade into the room, and his team rushed in behind it. The Council technicians were scientists, not soldiers. Most of them fled as soon as the shooting started. But a few stayed at their posts, trying to complete the weapon's activation sequence. Kim took down 2 guards with her plasma rifle while Nick dove for the main control panel. His fingers flew over the alien controls, using the codes that Dr. Mitchell had stolen from Omega Station. "I can't shut it down," Nick shouted. "The system is locked. We need Dr. Mitchell's countermeasure." Chief Engineer Ryan Cole had been working on the countermeasure for weeks, ever since Dr. Mitchell brought back the stolen bioweapon data. Ryan was not a soldier, but he had volunteered for this mission because he was the only person who understood how the countermeasure worked. "Give me 2 minutes," Ryan said, pulling out a device that looked like a cross between a computer and a medical scanner. "I need to interface with their system." Outside the control room, more council guards were arriving. The sound of weapons. Fire echoed through the corridors as Nick's remaining soldiers held them back. "We don't have 2 minutes," Kim called out. "They're bringing up heavy weapons." Ryan's device beeped as it connected to the council system. "Got it. The countermeasure is uploading now. But there's a problem. The weapon is already charging. Even if we stop it from firing at Earth, the energy has to go somewhere." "Where?" Nick asked. "Here," Ryan said quietly. "The energy will discharge into the planet's core. Terminus Gate will be destroyed." Nick felt his stomach drop. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 30 minutes before the planet breaks apart." Nick activated his radio. "All teams, this is Phoenix Leader. Mission accomplished, but we have a new problem. This planet is going to explode in 30 minutes. Everyone needs to get to the evacuation ships now." The message went out to human forces across the planet and in orbit. The battle for Terminus. Gate was won, but now it was a race against time. Captain Lisa Park had volunteered to pilot one of the evacuation ships. She brought her transport down through heavy fire, landing near the fortress to pick up survivors. Council ships in orbit were still fighting, not knowing that their own superweapon was about to destroy the planet they were defending. "How many?" "More?" Lisa asked as soldiers ran up the loading ramp. "This is the last group," called Sergeant Martinez. "Colonel Barnes and his team are still inside the fortress." Lisa looked at her watch. 20 minutes until the planet exploded. Inside the fortress, Nick and his team were fighting their way toward the exit. The corridors were filled with smoke and the sound of emergency alarms. Council defenders who had been trying to kill them minutes before were now running for their own lives. "This way," Kim shouted, pointing toward a stairway that led to the surface. But as they reached the stairs, the building shook with a massive explosion. Part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking their path. "We're trapped," one of the soldiers said. Nick looked around desperately. There had to be another way out. That was when he saw Ryan working at a wall panel. "What are you doing?" Nick asked. "There's an emergency transport system," Ryan explained. "It was designed to evacuate the fortress command staff if the planet was ever attacked. If I can get it working, it might get us to the surface." The transport system was old and had not been used in decades. But Ryan had spent his life making broken machines work again. If anyone could fix it, he could. "Got it," Ryan said as the panel lit up. "But the system can only handle 6 people at a time, and there are 12 of us." Nick looked at his team. They were all good people, soldiers who had volunteered for a mission they knew might be suicide. He could not ask them to sacrifice themselves. "I'll stay with the second group," Nick said. "No, sir," Kim replied. "You're needed to coordinate the evacuation. I'll stay." Before Nick could argue, Lisa Park's voice came over the radio. "This is Captain Park. I'm bringing my ship in for a close pickup. Get to the fortress roof in 5 minutes or I'm leaving without you." The roof was 10 levels up through corridors that might collapse at any moment. But it was their only chance. Nick's team split up. 6 soldiers took the transport system while Nick, Kim, Ryan, and 3 others fought their way up through the crumbling fortress. They reached the roof with 2 minutes to spare. Lisa's ship was hovering just above the building, its cargo bay open and ready. But as the soldiers ran toward the ship, the fortress shook again. Kim stumbled and fell as part of the roof collapsed under her feet. She was hanging by one hand. Over a drop that would kill her instantly. Nick reached for her, but he was too far away. That was when Ryan Cole, the gentle engineer who had never wanted to be a soldier, dove forward and grabbed Kim's hand. The roof gave way completely. Both Ryan and Kim fell into the darkness below. Nick screamed their names, but there was no answer. Lisa's ship was already pulling away, carrying the survivors to safety. 10 minutes later, Terminus Gate exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. 6 months after the Battle of Terminus Gate, Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Unity Station and watched ships from a dozen different species dock at the massive space station. The station had been built in just 4 months, using technology and workers from species that had never cooperated before. It was not the largest space station in the galaxy, but it was the most important. For the first time in 50,000 years, the galaxy had a government that served all species equally. "The crystalline delegation has arrived," reported Captain Danny Wu, Morrison's aide. "Speaker Zephyr wants to meet with you before the ceremony begins." Morrison nodded. The old speaker had been one of the Council's strongest supporters for the war against humanity. Now he was one of the loudest voices calling for peace and cooperation. Some humans did not trust him, but Morrison believed that people could change. When they saw their mistakes, the meeting room was simple, with chairs and tables designed for different types of alien bodies. Zephyr sat across from Morrison, his crystalline form dimmed with what humans had learned to recognize as shame. "Admiral Morrison," Zephyr said in his musical voice, "I come to ask for forgiveness that I do not deserve." Morrison looked at the alien leader for a long moment. "Speaker, we've all made mistakes in this war. The question is what we do now to make things better." "Your species continues to surprise me," Zephyr replied. "We tried to destroy you, and yet you offer us a place in your new government. Why?" Morrison smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We believe that everyone deserves a second chance to do the right thing." In the main assembly hall of Unity Station, representatives from 47 different species gathered for the signing of the new Galactic Charter. The document had been written over many months with input from philosophers, scientists, and ordinary citizens from across the galaxy. Dr. Kate Sullivan, now the first human speaker for the new Galactic Federation, walked to the podium. She looked out at the assembled delegates and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. So many good people had died to make this moment possible. "My friends," she began, "we gathered today not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in building something new. The old council ruled through fear and tradition. We choose to govern through cooperation and hope." The charter she was about to sign guaranteed basic rights to all intelligent species: the right to explore space, the right to develop new technology, the right to form alliances and friendships, most importantly, the right to exist without fear. "Some say that humans are too young to lead such an organization," Kate continued. "They are right. That is why we do not lead alone. Every species here today has wisdom to contribute. Every culture has something to teach the others." As she signed the charter, representatives from dozens of species stepped forward to add their own signatures. Zephyrians who had once been slaves now stood as equals beside their former masters. Verdians who had avoided conflict for millennia pledged to defend the rights of their new allies. Even some ethereals, beings of pure energy who had never cared about physical politics, agreed to watch over the new federation. But the real celebration was happening on thousands of worlds across the galaxy. On Zephyr 7, former slaves danced in streets that they now ruled as free citizens. On Verdian Prime, Ancient trees sang songs of joy that could be heard across entire continents. On Earth, people looked up at the stars and knew that their children would inherit a galaxy where anything was possible. General Pete Davis had retired from military service, but not from public life. He now worked as the Federation's director of exploration, helping to plan missions to regions of space that the old council had declared forbidden. "We've identified over 200 star systems that have never been explored," he told the Federation Council during a planning meeting. "Some of them may contain new forms of life. Others might hold scientific discoveries that could benefit all species." Admiral Morrison, now in charge of the Federation's combined fleet, nodded in agreement. "We'll need ships and crews from multiple species for missions this large. No single world has the resources to explore that much space alone." "That's the point," Kate Sullivan said from her position as speaker. "The old council kept species separate because they feared what we might accomplish together. We choose cooperation over isolation." The first joint exploration mission was scheduled to depart in 3 months. The fleet would include human ships with their advanced engines, Zephyrian vessels with their excellent sensors, and Vertian craft with their powerful shields. Even the Aquarians had volunteered to provide their expertise in underwater exploration. For any water worlds they might discover, Captain Maria Santos had been chosen to command the mission. Her ship, now called the New Horizon, had been completely rebuilt with technology from 6 different species. It was faster, stronger, and more capable than any ship that had ever been built. "Where are we going first?" asked her new first officer, Commander Kethmer. The Zephyrian had served with distinction during the war and had requested assignment to the exploration fleet. "The Magellan Cluster," Maria replied, pointing to a region of space on the star chart. "Long-range sensors have detected something unusual there. Energy readings that don't match any known technology. Could be dangerous," Kethmer observed. Maria smiled. "Could be wonderful. That's why we explore." But even as the galaxy celebrated its new beginning, there were signs that greater challenges lay ahead. Deep space monitoring stations had detected strange signals coming from beyond the galactic rim. The signals were clearly artificial, suggesting that other galactic civilizations existed in the vast emptiness between galaxy clusters. Dr. Julia White, now head of the Federation's Science Council, studied the signals with growing fascination. They seemed to be some kind of mathematical language, but unlike anything in the Federation's databases. "The signals are definitely coming from another galaxy," she reported to the Federation Council. "Based on the time it took them to reach US, they were sent approximately 50,000 years ago, right around the time the old council was first established," Morrison observed. Kate Sullivan felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think someone was watching us even then?" "Possible," Julia replied. "But we won't know for sure until we develop technology capable of sending messages across intergalactic space. That could take decades or even centuries." The news of the alien signals was kept secret for now. The galaxy was still recovering from one war. The Federation leaders did not want to cause panic about possible threats from outside their own galaxy. Instead, they focused on building the new government and exploring their own galactic neighborhood. There was so much to discover, so many species to meet, so many worlds to explore. On the anniversary of the Battle of Terminus Gate, the Federation held its first Memorial Day. Across the galaxy, people remembered those who had died fighting for freedom. In human space, they remembered Ryan Cole and Kim Lopez and the thousands of others who had given their lives. In Zephyrian territory, they honored the slaves who had died dreaming of freedom. On Vertian worlds, they planted new trees in memory of those who had fallen. Jake Morrison stood in the memorial garden on Unity Station, looking at a wall covered with the names of the dead. So many good people had died to make the Federation possible. The least the living could do was make sure their sacrifice had meaning. Do you think they would be proud of what we've built? asked Kate Sullivan, joining him at the memorial wall. Morrison nodded. I think they would be amazed. When this war started, we were just trying to survive. Nobody imagined we would end up changing the entire galaxy. The Council tried to destroy us because they feared change, Kate reflected. But change was exactly what the galaxy needed. As they stood together in the garden, ships from across the Federation continued to dock at Unity Station. Scientists sharing research that would benefit all species. Traders carrying goods between worlds that had never cooperated before. Families taking vacations to planets they had only dreamed of visiting. The galaxy was becoming something new, something that had never existed before. Not an empire ruled by the strong, but a community where every species could contribute their unique gifts. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, ancient signals continued to travel through space, carrying messages from civilizations so far away that their light had not yet reached Federation space. The Council had tried to outlaw humanity because they acted too late to stop the changes that humans brought to the galaxy. But even as the Federation celebrated its victory, new challenges were already heading their way from the depths of space. The future would bring new adventures, new discoveries, and new tests of the bonds that held the Federation together. But for now, the galaxy was at peace, and anything seemed possible under the light of a billion stars.